Hello everyone, this is Joel over here, and this is our 12th episode of our React series. And in this episode, we will just look into what is use effect. In previous episode, we just saw what is use state and how to use setter method and how to use the use state in our list functions and all those things we have seen. And in this 12th episode, we will just look into what is use effect. So yeah, let's get started. And let's open a JSX file over here. Okay, let's go with cards.jsx itself. So here I'm gonna create a use effect. In previous episodes, we saw this use state, right? So use state is a hook in React which is gonna return something. It's a function which is gonna return something. So since it's returning a something, we are just storing those values in a array or list kind of structure over here. It is a non-void function, whereas useEffect is a void function which is not gonna return anything. So we no need to save any kind of variables to save the useEffect over here. Instead, you can directly call the useEffect like use effect. That's it, and a parenthesis. So you have called the use effect. Once you call the use effect, you can check your import statement. Use effect has been imported over here. So you can either import it by typing it, or else if you just call this use effect, since we are using VS Code editor, use effect has been imported directly. Okay, now what should be passed inside a use effects argument? So basically, use effect takes two arguments, which is first argument as an anonymous function, which is arrow function, and second argument is a list or an array. So first let's go with arrow function over here. So now let me create a arrow function, okay, saying that console.log use effect is being called. Okay, so we have created a use effect. I mean, we have called a use effect and we have passed the first argument, which is anonymous function. And inside a function, we have used a statement called to print use effect is being called in the console. So now let's go to our web page and check. Let me go to right click and inspect. See, use effect doesn't show any kind of changes in your UI. Instead, it shows the changes in your console page. So now let's open to the console. Okay, let me refresh it. Okay, so now you can see I'm just refreshing it. You can see I'm refreshing it. So now you can see use effect is being called, is being printed twice over here. So in cards for JSX, we have used use effect, and console.log is being used to print the use effect is being called. Whereas in our console page, if you just see, use effect is being called and use effect is being called. It's been printed twice over here. First, let me say why this first statement has been printed over here. Basically, we know, right? React will render all the components when you start your application, when you start your engine over there. So while starting, as usual, while this HTML, CSS, all these course components and cards component, while they are rendering in the UI, even this use effect is being called over here. Okay, so why the second use effect is being called? Actually, React is being used to call twice. React usually renders a component twice because we are using a developer state mode over here. I'll just show you where is it. Let's go to this main.jsx. Okay. So in main.jsx, you can see strict mode and strict mode is being used over here. What does this strict mode says is you are still in a developer function. So React will take a feature that while you are rendering the first time of a components, it will render everything. While at the second time, if there is any error, React will show an error over here. Let's try it. I'm just okay. In use effect, I'm just removing this some few letters in use effect. Now if you go and check, you can see you have got an error over here saying useEff is not defined over here. Or else in import statement, if I remove this use effect, see again you are getting an error over here. So basically, since you are in developer mode, use effect will be called twice. Not only use effect, all the components will be called twice, because once it is used to render in the web page and second is used to check if there is any error in the elements. So that's the reason we got the use effect has been called as twice over here. Okay, so now we have seen a basic idea of use effect. So where's the JSX? Okay, here. So now we have an state variable, right, which is use state. In previous episode we just saw. Can we use this use state variables inside this use effect? Yes, of course you can use it. So let's try adding the state variable in our use effect. Okay, so instead of creating an another, okay, let me just create in course.jsx, um, or else I'll just do it in cards itself. Okay, so instead of course list, I'll just create a button over here, and in button I'll just create a on click property. Okay, so before that I'll just create a use state variable. So const dummy comma set dummy. Okay, okay, this should be in caps, I guess. Yep. A dummy comma set dummy is equal to use state false, or else true. Okay, let's keep it as false itself. Okay, use state false. So you have created a use state variable which is dummy. So now once this button has been clicked, I'm just gonna use this on click property and gonna mention over here, which is saying that set dummy to true over here. Okay, and here inside this use effect, let me print dummy console.log dummy is being printing over here. Okay, so now let's open to our web page. You can see a button exists. Since we didn't give anything, it's very small. Let's type something over here. uh, State variable. Okay, so yeah, now it's visible over here. So now if you check, I have said you right, React renders twice. So use effect is been called and use effect is been called. I have also said you that not only use effect, all the components, all the things which is inside our React will render twice. So state variable is also been rendered, which is inside the use effect. Basically, use effect has been called twice. Okay. So now, if we click the state variable, we have to get the false as true over here, right? Let's check state variable. Now you can see use effect is being called and we have successfully changed our state variable from false to true. So this indicates that state variable can be used inside a use effect. But there's a thing you should not use inside a use effect, which is using the setter method of the state variable inside the use effect. So what I'm gonna say over here is, see, we are just having this use effect thing. So this use effect thing is printing console.log. This is fine, and we are just printing the state variable over here. But this is our setter method, right? Set dummy is equal to true. This should not be inside the use effect. Why? Because let's consider you're just keeping this inside a use effect thing. Where is the okay? Okay. So now in use effect, React, while rendering all the components, use effect will be called. Am I right? Okay. So once this use effect has been called, this statement will be printed, which is use effect has been called, and dummy variable will be printed. And as a third statement, you have set dummy is true. So once the set dummy is true, again your component will be re-rendered. This is what we have seen in our previous episode, right? In use state, while you are changing the variable of your state variable, then again those component will be rendered again. If again it's been rendered, then use effect will be called again the statement will be printed, and this statement will be printed, and set dummy will be executed again, and it goes on infinite, and you will be inside a loop. So setter method should not be used inside the use effect. Okay, so now let's try this use effect in our course.jsx itself. Okay, so I'll just refresh it, I mean undo it. Okay, yeah. So now inside this course.jsx, again I'll just create a use effect. Let me create it over here. Okay, so use effect I have created. Same way I'm gonna create a anonymous function, and I'm gonna say is console.log use effect inside course.jsx file. Okay, so now if you just go and check our web page, the use effect is not defined because we have to import it, right? Use effect. So now you can see. Okay, so now you can see use effect inside course.jsx is been printed 4 times over here. Same way here also. Let me remove this use effect from cards. It will be more clear. I'll just comment this. Okay, I'll refresh it. Okay, now you can see use effect inside course.jsx file is been called 4 times over here. This is why, because HTML course component is rendered first. So while rendering this first time, use effect will be called over here. Same way CSS course will be rendered second. So again use effect will be called. Then for JS course, use effect will be called. Then for React course, use effect will be called. So since we have 4 components, and those 4 components will be called by this use effect. Okay, so now let's try clicking on this enroll with discount button. What happens, you just see. So when I'm just clicking this enroll with discount button, you can see again this use effect has been called. This is because while clicking on this enroll with discount button, you are just altering this component alone, which is changing this statement to the course has been purchased, and this statement is been changed, and again React will render this component, right? So again a rendering is happened. So use effect has been called over here. Same way while clicking on delete, it won't happen because delete is inside the cards.jsx file. We are deleting the particular object of a cards list in a cards.jsx file, but we are using use effect inside course.jsx file, so that doesn't make any change over here. But whereas you can see it shows 4 because HTML course has been rendered 1, JS has been rendered 2, React has been rendered 3, and one component got deleted. Even that is also rendering. We are just removing an element from an UI. So that is also rendering, right? So 4. 4 times it's been called. So now let's check it in tags or JSX. So what I'm going to do is a use effect has been called inside cards.jsx. So now you can see 4 times it's been used for course.jsx file, and use effect has been called, and use effect has been used 4 times, and use effect has been called. Why is this cards.jsx didn't been printed over here? Let me refresh it. Okay, so use effect is being called inside course.jsx file, which is 4 times, and in cards.jsx again you're just printing use effect is being called inside cards.jsx. So false, this is because of this state variable, and again it's printing the same thing. So now let's try deleting an component from here. Let's delete the CSS again. You can see now 3, because we are accessing this course.jsx file and cards.jsx file over here. Okay, because we have this use effect inside both cards.jsx as well as in course.jsx file over here. So basically, what I'm trying to say is whenever you start to render a single component in a React, use effect will be called in that respective JSX file. This is the thing which I wanted to convey over here. And the second thing which I said is use effect takes two arguments, which is first argument is an arrow function and second argument is an array. What is this is called dependency of the use effect. So by default, use effect will be called whenever you render a component in the UI. If you want the use effect to be dependent to something, you have to mention in the second argument with an arrow function over here. So let me go with cars.jsx itself. And we have this state variable button, right? So now here, where is this thing? Okay, here. What I'm gonna say is second argument I'm gonna pass, keeping this as dummy. Okay, not this D, right? Capital D. Yeah. So dummy. So dummy is the state variable which has been used. Okay. Use effect has been called inside cars.jsx. Let me refresh this. I'll just remove all these things. There is this. I'll just comment this. Okay. So now you have a use effect. It's gonna print console log and use effect has been called inside cars.jsx and dummy we have, and I have included comma square brackets and the state variable name, which is a list or array. So now you can see as usual it printed twice. So now if I just click on this state variable, then use effect is being called inside cards.jsx is true. Where else if I click on this delete, it won't. See, we have this use effect inside cards.jsx file. So if I click this delete, it should print this use effect, right? Because rendering it again, right? See, it's not printing anything. Now I'll just remove this. Okay. So now I'll just refresh it. If I click on state variable, use effect has been called and made true. If I click on delete, see use effect has been called inside thing. Whereas if I just add this dummy as a list, which is dependency, you can see I'm refreshing it. I'm clicking the state variable. This is printing. But while clicking this delete, you can see nothing has been printed as a use effect. This is because this particular use effect will render twice when the React starts to render everything as usual. When React finish its rendering, this use effect will give the control to this state variable, which is dummy. Whenever this dummy's variable is being altering, it's been changing, then this use effect will be called. Otherwise, this use effect will be sleeping inside as a silent thing. Okay. So this is the dependency of the use effect. And where this use effect will be used, because in APIs we have endpoint APIs. Okay, endpoint APIs is nothing but a JSON file. JSON file is something kind of this. This is a small objects with a list. So JSON file is almost similar to this. Okay, so using this fetch API, we are gonna fetch the JSON file components, and using this use effect only, we'll just alter this JSON file and we'll just showcase those JSON things to our rendered UI. So in those cases, this use effect will be very helpful. And let's see those fetch of API and all those things in our 13th episode of our React series. And hope you guys understood well what is use effect and used it from previous episode. Please do practice of this, and that's it. Thank you guys. Let's meet you on 13th episode of our React series. Thank you.